think we've still got the results on the screen, if that could be taken off. So we're going to very quickly review what academic writing task 1 is. And very quickly also review what the introduction to a process diagram is, because writing the introduction with the overview is terribly important. Then we're going to look at the grammar that we need for writing a good answer about a process diagram. And we're going to look at passives, linkers, and relative clauses. And you're going to have to do a little bit of work. I'm afraid I'm going to be giving you some little quizzes and tests as we go through. Then we'll do a general review. Then there'll be a chance for me to answer your questions. And then we'll go through the resources that we suggest you can use to help you in your preparation. Okay, so let's look at what academic writing task 1 actually is. So I'm going to show you some numbers, and in the chat box, could you please tell me what those numbers mean in relation to academic writing task 1? Okay. What does 20 mean? 20 what for writing task 1? Well done. Yes, it's all coming in very quickly. Yep, 20 minutes, excellent. Well done, everybody. Next one. What about this one? Yes, Salika, Sirin, yep, Galina, Shakil. Gosh, you're all getting the answers completely right. Words, good. Now, the next one, is this going to be a bit trickier? What about 6? What's the number 6 got to do with points? Types, somebody said. I didn't catch who that was. Somebody else has said types. Well done. Hold on. Task types. Yes, well done. Okay. And the last number for you to tell me about, number 4. What does 4 have to do with IELTS writing task 1? Paragraphs, that's an intelligent guess, but that's not what I was looking for. Olimaria says, I don't know. That's very honest and straightforward. Criteria, Isra. Okay, very good. Okay, so between you, yes, you've got all of those answers. So writing task 1 requires you to write a description of data that can appear in 6 different forms. They advise you to spend about 20 minutes on this task, which leaves you 40 minutes for task 2, and you should write at least 150 words, so a minimum of 150 words. And as some of you pointed out, it's marked by 4 criteria: task achievement, coherence and cohesion, lexical resource, and grammatical range and accuracy. And obviously, as this is a grammar for writing task 1, we'll be looking particularly at grammar, range and accuracy, but also coherence and cohesion. Okay, so another little quiz for you. In the chat box, these are the 6 forms the data comes in. What's number 1? Okay, number 1, I've got the number up. This one here, if you can see, somebody's saying pie charts. Okay, Nushin, Mai, okay, good. What about this one, number 2? What's number 2? Yes, line graph, Ritzy, Simba, Noel. Okay, and very good. Number 3, again, put 3, yes. Bar chart, people are putting, excellent. Number 4. In the chat box. Please put your answers in the chat box. I can't see question and answer at this stage, so please put your answers in the chat box. Okay, number 5. In the chat box, please. Yes, Maps Ritzy. Saba, yes. Daniel, yes. Okay, and the last one, number 6. What's this? Table number 6, Nigin. Yeah. Aisha, okay, excellent. So let's just make sure that everybody's got these clear. So 1 is a pie chart, a line graph number 2, 3 a bar graph, 4 a process diagram, 5 is the map or plan, and 6 is the table. Excellent. Okay, so this is an example of a typical process diagram question for part 1. Some of you, if you came to an earlier webinar about writing about processes, will have seen this before, but we're going to use it in a very different way today. Okay, so there's your question. The diagram below shows the process by which bricks are manufactured for the building industry. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. Okay, so that is what it is. So the first thing, we're just going to do a quick bit of revision, is the introduction. Okay, Saiful Islam, we can see your message in the chat box. So I can see the messages in the chat box. Remember, I can't see them in Q&A. Okay, so going back to the introduction, in the chat box, please, can you tell me what you should put into an introduction to a process diagram? Good, Rita, paraphrase the question, absolutely. And somebody said, Nirani, I think it was, said overview. My 2 favorite words, absolutely. Rephrasing and an overview, well done. Okay, so that's what the introduction has to have. But what is the overview for a process diagram? Because in charts, it's often, and line graphs and bar charts, it's often what changes the most. But what is it for a process diagram? Good, somebody's saying. First, how many stages? Absolutely, well done. Okay. So, first of all, we do the read phrase. So the process diagram illustrates how bricks are made to be used in the construction industry. So that's just using what was on the previous slide and changing it. And then the all-important overview. It is clear from this diagram that there are 9 main steps, okay? So you have 9 steps from the beginning to the end. And I think it always adds to the introduction if you describe the first step and the final step. So from the digging of the raw clay to the transportation of the bricks. Okay, good. That was just a quick overview, if you like, or a summary of what this task is and what the introduction is. So let's move on to the meat of this, which is the grammar for describing process diagrams. Okay, so the 3 areas we're going to look at is the passive voice. We're going to look at sequential linkers, and we're going to look at relative clauses. Okay, so first of all, why do you think we use the passive voice? Why do we use the passive for process diagrams? Please put in your ideas in the chat box. Reporting, it's like giving instructions. Yes, it belongs to the process, not the person. Yeah, we're not talking about ourselves. We're not talking about the work done by others. All really good stuff. Okay, well done, exactly. So another way of looking at it is, if you like, is you're changing, it's like being in a theatre and changing the spotlight. So if we're using the active voice, we want the spotlight on the people doing it. So the men load the lorry with the bricks. But when we're describing a process, we're more interested in the object, the thing that's being made. So in that case, we change our spotlight and we put it onto the object, the bricks, and then we use the passive. The bricks are loaded on the lorry. We're not very worried about who's doing it. Okay, and a quick reminder, I'm sure you all know this, but a quick reminder of how we actually make the passive voice. So it's important when you look at your diagram to see if there are any dates, because it is possible that you might get a sort of an ancient process rather than a current process. So just double check whether you should be writing in a present tense or in a past tense. So for the present passive, how do we form that? Balakrina, I'm sure I've just mispronounced your name terribly, but got it right. Is an R, third form of the verb. Alexandra, excellent, yeah. So is an R, or is or are really, and the past participle, or the third part of the verb, yeah, absolutely. So let's have an example. So the clay is extracted by a digger. And what about the past passive? How do we form the past passive? Was, were, yeah. Okay, everybody's got that. Thank you very much. Yes. So was or were and the past participle. And let's have an example of that. Okay. So was made. Excellent. So a little bit of practice then. Okay, here are some sentences from a process diagram. So they washed the strawberries and checked the quality. So in the chat box, please, the strawberries are washed. Nazila, yes. And the quality is checked. Zarina, absolutely. What about the next one? They moved the strawberries to the cleaning section. The strawberries, yes. I think it's Rita. Kevin, yes. Simbat, yes, are moved to the cleaning section. They clean the fruit with water. The fruit. Usden, yes. Be careful about whether it's plural or whether it's singular. Okay, is cleaned. And the last one, they add water and sugar to the fruit. So water and sugar. Again, be careful, Sarah. Is it singular or plural? Okay, let's just check. I think you all got those absolutely right. Okay, well done, everybody. Okay, so let's move on to look at our example question. Okay, now, if you've got a piece of paper and a pencil handy, that would be great. So here we've got our diagram here, and we've got all these sentences which describe this process. And we've started with G, which is the clay is dug out of the ground. And the last thing is F, the bricks are ready and are packaged and finally loaded onto a lorry to be delivered to the construction industry. Okay, so let's do this together step by step, okay? So G, the clay is dug out of the ground. Now have a look at this one. Which sentence comes after that? Just put the letter of the sentence. Okay, good. Kahir, Jingan. Yep. Well done, everybody. Kushaga, Avra, not, okay, Nabila, yes. A. Okay, so it's put on a metal grid and rolled. Okay, what happens next? Have a look at the diagram. What happens next? Put the letter into the chat box. Remember, I can't see anything in Q&A at all. I can only see the chat box, so please put your answers there. Oh, a lot of you are saying B. Okay, let's have a look and see if you're right. Yes, you are. Well done, everybody. So then sand and water are added. Okay, have a look at the next stage of the diagram, the process. And again, put the letter of the sentence into the chat box. Okay, we've got a bit of a mixture here. We've got H and E, lots of H's. Let's just check if you're right. Yes, absolutely, it's H. So the mixture is either cut or molded into the correct brick shape. Okay, next one then. What happens next? In the chat box. We've got E's. Gutam has already done the whole process. Well done, Gutam. Okay. Most of you are putting E. Absolutely. The bricks are placed in an oven to dry over a period of 1 to 2 days. Next, please. Okay, yes, let's have a look. And it's I. They're put into a kiln to be baked. And then we have more information about that process. What sentence is next? After Nafisa, yes, Lydia, Hatis, Jolly, Nimra, Galaxy. Okay, Simbat, you're all saying C, and you're absolutely right. And then what happens next? Okay, a lot of you are putting D, Saeem, Rahul, Hafsa, Lydia, Irvin, Jonathan, excellent. Yep, it's D. And then we have the F. So the bricks are ready in a package and loaded and sent off to the building industry. Okay, so that is a simple exercise just to get an idea of what the actual process is. And as you can see, we've got our 9 steps. Okay, so passive voice we use to describe the process, and we also mentioned that we used sequential linkers. Okay, what are sequential linkers? Could you give me your ideas in the chat box, or give me some examples? Next, Isra says. Then, Salhi. Firstly, Akshi. First, Yasaman. Fariba says then. Yep. Okay, next, then. Secondly, finally. After that, Chandra, good. In addition, possibly. Okay, very good. Let's then look at some of the ones. This is not a complete list. This is just to give you some more examples. So to begin with, firstly, and then we can put next, then, after that, afterwards. And obviously, we can put finally, lastly. And we can also use before, but we have to use before very carefully, because when we use before, we often change the order around. So now I hope you're all ready for a little quiz. Are you ready for a quiz? Yes, you sure, Rita? Yes, Lydia? Somebody's saying no. Well, if you're saying no, perhaps have a very quick cup of tea or something, and we'll give the quiz to the people who want it. Okay, let's have a look then. All right, so here we have all of those sentences, but put in now into the correct order. And we're going to have the next poll question, please. Okay, which you can scroll down. Okay, so for each of those numbers 1 to 7, I want you to choose the correct linker. Okay, so if you can't answer in the poll question, or you can't see the poll question, I will read each of them out and you can put your answer in the chat box. So if you can't see, just listen carefully and put your answer in the chat box. So number 1, would you use then or firstly? Number 2, look at the gap. Would you put next or after? Please answer in the poll question if you can see it. Only answer in the chat box if you can't. Number 3, would you put after or then? Number 4, would you put after this or thirdly? Number 5, would you put before or after? And number 6, would you put after or afterwards? And number 7, the last one, would you put ninthly or finally? I'll just give you 10 more seconds to answer in the poll. Okay, so can we see the results of that, please? Okay, very good. So 98% of you said firstly, and number 2, it is next, very good. Number 3, you've put then, yep. Number 4, 84% have put after this, very good. Number 5, yeah, that was a tricky one. 54% of you put before, 47% put after. I changed the order, and so I could use a slightly different linking word. I wanted to use before because it's not used so often. By changing the order, you can use before. Number 6, yes, afterwards, very good, most of you got that. And 98% of you got finally, yes. We don't use sort of seventhly, eighthly, ninthly. We just tend to use firstly, secondly, possibly thirdly, but we don't go any higher than that. Okay, excellent. So let's just double check. I'll just leave that on the screen. Somebody's saying they got them all correct. Well done. Okay, have a look at that. I'll just give you a minute to read through it and particularly look at the sentence starting with before. Well done. Lots of you got them, most of them right, all of them right. Okay, Gugan Edison saying all correct, I'm going to Cambridge. You certainly are. Okay, good. All right. Okay, so when we look at this, it's a good solid answer. It's got every single stage, it's in the correct order, and we've used a reasonable variety of linking words. So it's all good. And I think, you know, that would be a good high scoring essay to write, report to write. But in some ways, it's a little bit mechanical. We've just put sentence after sentence after sentence, and we've put a linking word with it. So it's looking at trying to get a higher mark than that. And one way of doing that is by combining sentences using a range of sentence structures, which will increase your band score in grammar. So we can do that by using relative clauses, which are a simple, easy way of expanding your range of structures. Okay, so let's have a look at relative clauses. Again, just quickly to just remind you all about it. Okay, so relative clauses are often used to join two sentences or to add extra information. And to do that, we need to use relative pronouns. So can you, you've already guessed what I was going to ask you. Can you put in the chat box, please, some examples of relative pronouns? Which, where, Norita and etc. aren't relative pronouns. Furthermore, is not whom, Josephine, yes, perhaps. that, who, okay, yes, I think you've got those. Okay, let's have a look. We use which when we're describing objects. That is grammatically correct, but it's used much less formally. We tend to use that when we're speaking, and it's better to use which when we're writing relative clauses. We can use where for places, describe what happens in places. When for time, obviously. And who for people. But generally speaking, we don't often refer to people very often when we're dealing with a process diagram because we're not interested in the people. Do you remember the spotlight? We don't want the spotlight on the people. We want the spotlight on the actual object. Okay, and just let's quickly remind ourselves of the two main types of relative clause. Okay, so the first one is what we call a defining relative clause, which tells you exactly what something is. So, for example, we've got two sentences here. Obesity is a problem, and the sentence, it needs to be addressed. We can put those together and say obesity is a problem which needs to be addressed. So this defines, this tells us which problem needs to be addressed. There may be many problems, but we're explaining that we're defining obesity as the problem that needs to be addressed. And let's look at the other type. Okay, so a non-defining relative clause just gives you extra information. You don't need it necessarily, but it's useful very often, this extra information. So obesity is a problem. Obesity can affect people of all ages. We put it together and we say obesity, which can affect people of all ages, is a problem. Okay, and notice that the extra information, which can affect people of all ages, is in brackets. And in terms of speaking, it's worth, and you're listening, it's worth knowing that when we say these things, these relative clauses, we actually show when there's a comma with our voices. So let me just read that non-defining relative clause for you. Obesity, which can affect people of all ages, is a problem. So we have a little bit of a pause with the commas to show that we're giving extra information. So that might help you when you're listening as well. Okay, so are you ready for another quiz? Yes, yes. No one's saying no this time. That's because you all did so well, I think, probably. Okay. Right, just before we do the quiz, I noticed, I think it was Mohammed asking, can we use that instead of which? As I just said, Mohammed, that is grammatically correct, but it's less formal. So when we're writing relative clauses, we tend to use which. When we're speaking, we can use that. Grammatically, there's no difference. It's just a matter of register. Okay, on to the quiz then. Okay, so again, you've got 6 sentences and I'm going to show you a poll question. So if we can have the next poll question, please. Thank you. Again, people who cannot see the poll question, I will read it out and you can put your answers in the chat box. So quite simply, I want you to choose the correct relative pronoun for each of these sentences. So for number 1, is it where or which? So in the poll question, if you can see it, in the chat box if you can't. Number 2, is it where or is it which? Number 3, the question's very simple. Is it where or is it which? Do put in, if you're writing in the chat box, put the number as well so I can see which sentence you're talking about. Okay, that's better. Thank you, Serena. Okay, number 4, same question. Is it where or which? Okay, and 5 and 6, is it where or which? I'm just going to give you another minute or two to complete that poll question. Okay, thank you. Okay, so can we see the results, please? Okay, so let's have a look. So number 1, 91% of you got it right with they are moved to a place where they can be inspected and cleaned. Okay, number 2, 80% of you chose which is the correct answer. Number 3, let's have a look. 89% of you got it correct with which, well done. Number 4, yes, well done. 86% of you got it right with which. Number 5, good, 85% correct with where. And the last one, 87% were correct with where. Very good. Okay, excellent. Okay, so I'm going to give you one more little question about this. So can we see the next poll question, please? Okay, so I would like you to read those 6 sentences, and I want you to decide whether they are defining or non-defining relative clauses. Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple of minutes. So for each one, if you can't see the poll question, then again, write your answers in the chat box. Numbers 1 to 6, are they defining? Just write D. Or are they non-defining? Just write ND. So if you can't see the poll question, write that in the chat box. If you can, I'll give you another couple of minutes because it's, yeah. Okay, another couple of minutes. Linda, I'll go through the answers and explain which ones are defining and non-defining when everybody's had a chance to answer the poll questions. Just going to give you one more minute. Don't worry, Mohammed, I'll come back to the defining and non-defining in a minute. Okay, good. So can we see the result of the poll question, please? Okay, for number 1, people said defining, correct. Number 2, defining, correct. Number 3, non-defining, well done. Number 5, non-defining, number 6, non-defining, and the last one, defining. Excellent. Let's just have a look and talk through those answers. Okay, so again, defining relative clauses tell us what something is. I mean, if we just look at number 1, if we just have the sentence, the strawberries are moved to a place, we don't know what that place is. We've got no idea. But if we add a defining relative clause where they can be washed and cleaned, inspected and cleaned, it's clear that that's the place they're going to. So it tells us, it defines the place, and that's a defining relative clause. Okay, the same thing, excuse me, the same thing applies for number 2. If we just look at the main sentence, we've got the mixture is held in a chamber. Well, again, we don't know what that chamber is. It could be anything. But if we add a defining relative clause, it tells us exactly which chamber, the chamber which allows it to be heated to 100 degrees. Okay, so defining tells us what something is, specifically what something is or where it is, whatever. But a non-defining just gives us extra information. And again, remember the commas are very useful. That tells, oops, sorry, let's just go back. Okay, the commas tell us that this is extra information that we can take out of the sentence. So we can say the jam is sent to the packaging department, and that's a perfectly useful sentence. But we're telling everybody more about it. We're saying the jam, which is now bottled and labelled, is sent to the packaging department. Okay, and again, number 4, it's non-defining. So we've got the commas and we've got extra information. So the actual core sentence is preventable diseases are frequently a result of polluted water supplies. Okay, that's a perfectly good sentence. But we're giving a little bit of extra information. So preventable diseases, which are still commonplace in many parts of the world, are frequently a result of polluted water supplies. And the same with the next 2. So you've got a non-defining aquifers, we're just being told, aquifers are being drained by overexploitation. That's perfectly good. And we're just giving a little bit more information. Okay, and the last one, it's telling us, I mean, it's not just all schools. It's not kindergartens or colleges. It's not everywhere. It's schools where music and art are taught often have better examination results. So it's defining the type of schools that do this. Okay. So let's have a little look at how this applies to our essay or our report that we're writing. Okay, so have a look at this. After this, excuse me, let me just get rid of that. The bricks are placed in the oven to dry over a period of 1 to 2 days. Okay, can we think of a way of using a relative clause to expand our range of structures? If you've got any ideas, do put them into the chat box. Thank you. In an oven where, okay, well done, Irvin, good. Some of you are suggesting where, in an oven where, Sirin, where they are dried, Chandra. Okay, very well done, everybody. Let's just have a look. So after this, the bricks are placed in an oven where they are dried over a period of 1 to 2 days. Very good, everybody. Or where they are allowed to dry. Yes, that's also possible. Somebody suggested. Okay, let's have another one. Okay, so again, we've got our linking word afterwards. The bricks are cooled. This process takes between 2 and 3 days. Again, in the chat box, please, can you tell us how we can link these 2 sentences together? Somebody saying which takes. You're all very good at this. Absolutely. Well done. Are called which, Marina? Amit saying which. Okay, let's have a look. There you go, you're all right. So afterwards, the bricks are cooled, a process which takes between 1 and 3 days. Yes, some of you are writing the whole sentence. Well done. Okay, excellent. And the last one. At this stage, the bricks are ready and are packaged and finally loaded onto a lorry to be delivered to the construction industry. So this was our last sentence, if you remember. Can you put those together? How would you put that together with a relative clause? Again, people are saying which. Where? Okay, there's a little bit of a mixture with this one. It's quite a long sentence. Let's just have a look at what are my suggestion. So at this stage, the bricks, which are now ready and packaged, are finally loaded onto a lorry to be delivered to the construction industry. So well done if you got that last one right, because that was quite tricky. Okay, now let's go back to our model answer. And now you can see that as well as having a nice range of sequential linkers, including a tricky before, we've also put in these relative clauses, which again expands the grammatical structures that we're using. Okay, so let's look then at the final results. That's the essay that we've put together, or the description that we've put together over this webinar with the introduction. It's about 177, well, it's 177 words. And let's just double check. So what are the things in green? What's in green? Can you put in the chat box? What are the words that I've put in green? Yeah, absolutely. They're verbs, but they're the passives. Yep. Excellent. What are the words and phrases in red? Maria Garcia, they're the linkers. Yes, exactly. Sequential linkers, Doris, exactly. Ihunanya, exactly. Sequence. Yep, very good. Yep, Virginia, exactly. Okay, Mandeep, very good. And then the blue, yes, Manjit, that's our relative pronouns. Yes, Sarah, relative clauses, relative pronouns. Excellent, well done. So that's I mean, I would think that's probably a band 9 score in case anybody's interested. Okay, and just to show you why we've been going through this, because to get a 7 and 8, so getting above that 6, you need to use a variety of complex structures or a wide range. So if you can introduce some relative clauses, that just shows that you can use a variety at least. Okay, and then the linking words, it comes into coherence and cohesion, and as it says here, for 7 uses a range of cohesive devices appropriately, or manages all aspects well. So that's the good thing about using a nice variety and twisting a little bit by bringing in that before and changing the order. And the task achievement really refers particularly here to the fact that we've written a clear introduction with a clearer overview of the stages, but also that we've said there are 9 stages, and we've presented and highlighted and illustrated those 9 features, those 9 steps clearly and appropriately. Okay, so let's just review what we've done, and then we'll move to questions and answers. Okay, so look at all the instructions and on the information on the diagram, and rephrase this information into the first sentence of the introduction. and then count the number of stages and steps and write the second sentence of the introduction, which is the overview. And if you can add the first step and the last step in that, that would be even better. Just double check whether the diagram is about a past or present process. It's usually present, to be honest, but they can put in a past one, so do just check. Describe each stage or step of the process and remember to use the passive voice, sequential linkers, and relative clauses. And if there is time, write a brief one-sentence conclusion rephrasing the overview. Just to emphasize this, a conclusion is not necessary. Only if you've got time. Concentrate on writing a really, really good description. Okay, so I'm going to go over to the questions and answer. And what I'd like you to do is put any questions and I'll try to answer them in the question and answer book now, box now, and at the same time, if you could write in the chat box what you found useful or have liked about this webinar, because all the information and feedback you give us helps us improve our next ones. Okay. Taskinul is asking for some resources. We'll be going on to resources in a minute. Olamide, as regards defining and non-defining relative clauses, questions, that seems to have disappeared. About commas. Yes, you do need commas for a non-defining and extra information relative clause. If it's in the middle of the sentence, you obviously need 2 commas, but sometimes you can put an extra information clause at the end, in which case you just need the one to separate it from the main sentence. Okay. Sorry. Vaibhavi, no, these questions aren't asked for general training. This is academic. Okay. Biruk is saying, is this correct? The person who stands behind the shop, which sells musical instruments, which are made by a famous company, is my friend. Biruk, that is an absolutely amazing sentence. And it's full of nice clauses. The only thing that's wrong with it is I don't think we'd ever say that or write it, but I think it's an extremely clever sentence, so well done to you. Gillian is asking what are examples of past processes? Well, I mean, it could be anything. It could be how the Egyptians or how the Chinese made paper. It could be how violins were made in Italy in the 16th century. I mean, I don't know. It could be anything where something has been made in the past that isn't made in the same way today. Let me just find some more. A lot of you are saying about not being able to get the recordings of webinars you've attended. I'm afraid you need to go to our Facebook page and ask there. That's where you'll get that information. Okay. Can I write a conclusion about task 1? Ipa's asking. Yes, Ipa, you can, if you want to. If you've got time, but remember, you've only got 20 minutes, and that's the analysis of the diagram, that's thinking about what the overview is, it's writing a good, clear introduction, it's then going through the process, and it's making sure that you're using the sequential linkers, that you've got a nice range of sentence types because you're using relative clauses. The conclusion is only really a sort of one sentence roundup, a repeat of your overview. So you can do it, but if you've got time. Vatsal is saying, please make webinars for other tasks. We'll put it on our list, Vatsal. Okay. The word limits in the computer delivered. Yes, when you're writing on the computer, if you're doing the computer delivered, you will have an automatic word count dial that you can see. So you'll be able to keep an eye on that and know how much you've written. If you're writing it on paper, you just have to practice writing it on paper and sort of getting a rough idea of, say, to do 150 words, perhaps you need 15 lines or something like that. Please don't waste your time in the test counting your words. Okay, I think we've got time for one more question. Dearest, I think it's a question that lots of people are worried about. Is it possible to complete in time while you're in the exam? Yes, it is. It is. You've got to make sure in advance that you know what you're doing. So if you like, have a sort of like a game plan, you know that you've got to write a good introduction. So you know you've got to rephrase and you've got to write an overview. Okay, so you go in and you can get that done. And then it's a matter of working through step by step, thinking of adding linkers. You can make a little note to yourself, add linkers, add relative pronouns. Okay.